Okay, so that's the first couple of elements for the contrapositive. But now we have to talk about two other elements. The first one, we have to talk about how to really identify, how to really see the contrapositive. So I'm actually going to tell you something that is a little bit different. We are not going to write down the contrapositive. Instead, we are going to see the contrapositive. We're going to write down the if-then rules, but we're not going to write down the contrapositive for each rule. You know, it creates a mess if you do that. There are some games, and you'll see, have like 4 or 5 if-then rules, and if you write down the contrapositive for each, you will become overwhelmed with rules. Instead, you really need to see the contrapositive. It turns out, and again, this is in my experience doing this for 9 years now, since 1999, you will really end up seeing that this is a more effective way of dealing with the contrapositive, really seeing the contrapositive rather than merely just writing it down. So what do I mean by that? And once again, what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of talk to you about how that's going to work, and then I'm going to show you what we have in the training manual. So here's the idea. Every if-then rule has 2 ifs attached to it, at least 2 ifs or 2 triggers attached to it. So what do I mean by that? If C, then D. Okay. This rule tells me 2 things. It has 2 ifs. I have 2 ifs or 2 triggers here. Number 1, if C, right? If C, that triggers the conclusion that we have to have D. But number 2, we have if not D. And that's it. We don't know anything about if no C. If not C, we may or may not have D. We don't know. If D, we may or may not have C. We just don't know. We just know if we have C, we definitely have D. And if we don't have D, we definitely don't have C. So we have 2 ifs attached to this rule. Well, let's talk about another one. If F, then G and H. We have 3 ifs attached to this rule, 3 of them. 3 ifs. Number 1, if F, right? If F, then we know I have both G and H. What's the contrapositive to this rule? Again, switching and negating, switching and to or. We have if not G or if not H, then not F. Therefore, our second if is if not G. If not G, then not F. Number 3, if not H. So this rule, if F, then G and H, gives us 3 ifs, 3 triggers. If F, then G and H. If not G, then not F. If not H, then not F. And again, this is all in your training manual. I'm going to have you review this in just a minute. But for now, I just want to go over this a little bit. The third example will be if K, then L or M. In this case, we have 2 ifs. Number 1, if K. Once again, if K, then I have L or M, or both. That doesn't exclude the possibility or both. Then the second if is a little bit tricky. We switch the or to an and. So I know if not M and not L. Grammatically speaking, it would actually be if neither M nor L. We would write it out as if not M and not L, but the correct grammar, as they might point out on the LSAT would use the, well, in this particular case, would use the correct grammar. They would say something like neither M nor L. So once again, we only have 2 ifs here. We know if K, we know what happens. We know we have L or M or both. Number 2, if not L and not M, then we know we don't have K. So this is how you're going to look at these if-then rules. Before I have you refer back to the training manual, let me give it to you in kind of another way. Let's take a look at this again. So again, these examples. If C, then D. If F, then G and H. If K, then L or M. Okay. You really need to be able to see all of the ifs for all of these rules. There's a couple of different ways to do that. You go down the left side of the rules, and then you can go down the right side of the rules, negating as you go along. So for example, this first rule, if C, second, if F, third, if K. Back up to the first rule on the right side, if not D. Second rule on the right side, if not G or not H. Third rule on the right side, if not L and not M. So you go down the left side of the rules, looking for your ifs. Then you go down the right side, negating each side. Let me give it to you one more way, then I'll have you look over the training manual. You could look at each rule going left and right, left and right. So for example, this first rule of C, then D, we have two ifs again. On the left, if C. On the right, if not D. Second rule, we have if F. On the right, if not G or if not H. And on the third rule, if K, that's on the left, and on the right, neither L nor M, or if not L and not M. Okay, so that's some thrilling stuff for you. And again, this is your contrapositive, which you will come to know and love. Let's just talk about what we have in the training manual. So this is going to be in the last page of formal logic, number Roman numeral 3. What I would like you to do is just go ahead and just read that over. It's just a review of what we just did. Go ahead and pause, read that over. Okay, only two more elements to talk about when it comes to this formal logic stuff. We now need to talk about how to translate rules into if-then form. So, clearly, if a rule says if X then Y, then you can write it down as if X then Y. But what if a rule says something like X only if Y? That actually can be translated, or should be translated into if X then Y. Well, why is that? Well, again, instead of using our abstract formal logic like X and Y, let's talk about rabbits and animals. So I know that it's going to be a rabbit only if it's an animal. Well, that can be translated as if it's a rabbit, then it's an animal. Okay? So, in other words, these rules, they don't have to just say if then. They can be phrased in all kinds of different ways. One of the classics is when you see the word only. And what you need to do is, as soon as you see the word only, what you have to know is that the words immediately following only are the then element of the if-then statement. So again, back to what we just talked about, X only if Y. Well, yeah, we have an if coming before the Y, but that doesn't matter. We have an only there. And the fact is, whatever comes right after the only is the then element of the if-then rule. So once again, X only if Y translates as if X then Y. How do I know that? Because if I use practical formal logic, it's a rabbit only if it's an animal. Well, that can be translated as if it's a rabbit, then it's an animal. And again, this is in the training manual, but I'd like to show you just one more example. What if I were to say, not X unless Y? Well, believe it or not, this is translated into if X, then Y. And again, how do I know that? Well, again, I can use this rabbit and animal example. It's not a rabbit unless it's an animal, right? Not a rabbit unless it's an animal. Well, put another way, if it's a rabbit, then it's an animal. So the point being is that these rules that can be rephrased into if-then form can show up in all kinds of different ways. The classic ways are when they use the word only or not unless. Those are the two kind of trickier ways in which they will show up. But they can show up in all kinds of different ways. And if you're not too sure how to translate it into if-then form, that what side is the if and what side is the then, please use rabbit and animal. Substitute the terms rabbit and animal and think to yourself which one fits. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is take out your training manual again, go to Roman numeral 4, and where it says the following can be rephrased as if X then Y, and just take a minute to read that over. Go ahead and press pause and go ahead and read that over.